everyone, it's Gabby here and welcome to another video on my YouTube channel. Today I'm going to be showing you how to make a miniature shaker window with this monster stamp set that I got from Bo Bunny. I'm going to be using that, and I'm also going to be using a sentiment from a hero art stamp set that I really like and that I use a lot. It has a bunch of different sentiments. I'm going to be using the one that says sending warm fuzzies. So things are going to move kind of quick here because this card did take a little bit of time, but I want to be able to get you through everything. So here I'm using a piece of crumb cake paper, and I'm cutting it to 5.5 by 4.25. And here I just have a piece of turquoise cardstock, and then I'm cutting them both down to the size of an A2 note card. So I decided to make a landscape card for this. So that's why I'm cutting like each piece down in half, because those are going to be the parts that are going to be the front of my card. And here I am doing a little bit of a dotted rectangle border. And I'm also going to be using some lawn fawn lawn cuts for the stitched hillside borders. And I'm going to do sort of like a 2-layer card front right here. So this is me doing the dotted rectangle first, and that is a Spellbinders die set that I like a lot. I use it pretty often. And then the next part I'm going to do is the stitched hillside. Then I'm going to go ahead and run that through my Big Shot as well. And I used the one with like the little wavy hillside. I liked it a lot. Now initially I was going to leave these the same size, but I decided I wanted to cut that piece of crumb cake down so that it would sit inside the dotted rectangle. So now I'm just placing my stamp to make sure that I like how everything looks before I start taping anything down. So here I am adhering my crumb cake paper to my dotted rectangle. And now that that's done, I'm going to go ahead and stamp my image. So I'm using my Stamp Perfect tool, and I didn't season this stamp at all. It's brand new, so I'm going to stamp it a couple times, and I'm using some Memento Tuxedo black ink there. And I just want to make sure I get a really crisp, clear, dark image. And since I already have my stuff out, I'm just going to stamp it another time on the opposite side of the paper, because I know I'm only going to need one of these stamps, but I'll just keep that one for later in case I want to make this card again, or I want to use that stamp for something else. So I'm just going to clean off my stamp, and now I'm going to start moving in hyperspeed as I'm doing my coloring. So I'm just doing some pretty simple coloring here with my chows, and I'm just using 3 different shades of like a teal, a really light one, of course a much darker one, and it turns out I'm actually only going to use those 2. At first I had those 3, but then I realized I could probably get it done with just these 2. So I'm doing a little bit of shading there, and I'm imagining that my light source is coming from the top right, so all of my shadows are to the left side of my little monster there. And this was super fun to color. It's pretty straightforward too. And I'm doing a little bit of yellows and oranges on the horns and the feet, and then again I'm doing the same thing with just some super simple shading there. And then here I'm just going back in and blending out one more time, just to make sure that everything looks exactly the way that I want. And then I'm doing his face in like a really light ice blue there, and a little bit of gray for shading on the mouth and the nose and the eyes. So the next thing I'm going to do, since I said this was going to be a shaker card, I'm going to cut out that little area on his tummy, and that's where my shaker window is going to go. So I'm just going to cut that out. And then since I don't have dies for this stamp set, I'm going to go ahead and just fussy cut this out. I'm not going to make you guys watch all of that because it took a pretty long time. He's pretty intricate there. So once I had everything all done and cut out, my next part was to start to put together my shaker window. So I did this by using a little bit of craft foam and just some acetate right there, and I just did some sort of eyeball measurements, just enough to cover the hole in his tummy, and then make sure that it wasn't visible from the front. So I'm just going to trace that onto a piece of craft foam there, And then I'm going to cut the same thing out. And then I decided that I wanted my little shaker well to be just a little bit thicker. So I decided to cut another piece of that craft foam out. And I'm tracing the circle right there so I'll know what to cut out on my little piece of craft foam that is going to help build up my well where all of my little stuff is going to sit. So now that I've got that done, I'm just cutting out where I traced that little circle. And it's cut a little bit bigger than what I traced because I want to make sure that that doesn't show through when you're looking through the shaker window. I want to make sure that you don't see any of that craft foam as you're just looking directly straight on. So now I'm checking to make sure everything looks the way I want it to. And then I went in with a black marker and just colored in the edges around his tummy where I cut that hole out because I just wanted to make sure that it looked really finished and really clean there. And I also went around all of the outer edge that I cut out as well. So now I'm going to adhere my acetate, and I'm doing this with some 1/8 of an inch thick double-sided tape. And this is just, this tape doesn't have any dimension to it. It's just double-sided adhesive that's very, very thin. So now I'm just going to take off all my release paper, and then I'm going to attach my piece of acetate to that once I get that all peeled off. And this is how I'm going to start to build up my shaker window. So the next thing I'm going to do after this is start to put on my little craft foam circles, and I'm doing them the exact same way. I'm just going to apply adhesive to them, peel that off, and then just stick those right on to my little monster's belly there. And I'm just going to repeat this process with that piece and the second piece because, again, like I said, I wanted it to just have a little bit more dimension because I wanted all of my stuff to shake around freely in there. And I really like this 1/8 of an inch thick or 1/8 of an inch wide double-sided tape because it allows things like this where you can do a shaker window and you can get really, really close to the edge without it being too wide and you having a bunch of extra adhesive. So it's a really nice size if you're doing something like shaker windows or even adhering something very, very small. Okay, so now because I've got the 2 layers of craft foam on my shaker window now, the next thing I have to do is I doubled up some foam tape and I'm just cutting that into little strips and pieces to put it on the rest of my little monster so that when I stick him on the front of this card, everything's sort of level and even. And then I cut some really small pieces out for the legs and the side of the horns because I wanted everything to sort of to be stuck there, but also raised up enough that he's not kind of sagging or he's not like bowed in the middle because of the double craft foam on his shaker window. So now's the really, really fun part. It's putting all the stuff inside of my little shaker window. And then, I'm cutting this last piece of acetate for the back because I thought I wanted this to be clear, but as you can see, when I'm done with this, I'm actually going to put a piece of white there on the back. So I'm using my EK Tools powder tool there, and I've got some mixed sequins. I've got some small silver hearts, and I've got a couple of sequins from Pretty Pink Posh in there, the purpley ones. I can't remember what the name of that mixture is, but I've had it for a little while. And so I'm just making sure that I do a really good job with my powder tool because I want to make sure that those guys move around in there freely and they don't get stuck. And it's a really small area. And then I've just got some extra cute little sequins there that are almost like snowflakes because I was thinking almost use like kind of like a Yeti type monster. So now we're going back to building up the card, and I'm going to stamp that sentiment, that sending warm fuzzies, right on the front of that because now my little shaker monster is all done. So I'm using my Stamp Perfect tool again. And unfortunately here I move out of frame just a little bit, but I was using my monster right there to check to make sure that that sentiment was going to be stamped where I wanted it and he was still going to have room to fit. So I'm using some Pacific Point ink from Stampin' Up! And I thought that would be a nice color to sit on the front of this with the turquoise background and the crumb cake background. So now I stamped that twice just to make sure that I have a really like nice clean stamped image. So now I'm going to just go ahead and peel off my release paper and attach my little monster there. And then, like I said, what I ended up doing here was moving pretty quickly. Once I had that on there, I decided that I wanted to put a piece of white paper behind it. So since there was no adhesive directly on the back of his tummy, I was able to just sort of slide a piece of paper in there. And I didn't show that part in the video because I didn't record it. I decided after I'd already finished it. But what I'm doing here is I'm trimming the very edges of this, because once I set it on the front of the card, I realized I wanted a little bit of the white to show on the card base. And I'm using a 110-pound Nina Solar White card base for this. And I wanted just a little bit of that to show around the edges. So I cut my card front down just a little, and then I'm just cleaning up there any little pieces that didn't cut cleanly with my trimmer. And then I'm going to set that on the front of my card base and glue that down with some of my Tombow stamp runner. And yeah, I'm just checking to make sure. And I didn't want to put any more foam tape or anything on there because I felt like it already had a ton of dimension from the double craft foam and the double foam tape. So I'm just going to stick it right onto this card base. And now that that's all done, like I said, when you see the finished picture, you're going to see a little piece of white behind that. And then here I'm just stamping my own stamp on there that I almost stamped upside down. All right. And now you can see the little window, all the stuff's moving in there. And here's the actual finished card with the white piece of cardstock behind it. And I thought that this gave it a really, really nice look. And it was a really easy fix for this, but now that you're watching the video, you'll know beforehand. And you can just add that piece of paper from the beginning. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I'll be back soon, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Thanks, bye.